Our crossover episode of Locked On Avalanche and Locked On Panthers. Yes, we figured there's only two teams that can do this. A number one seed crossover, the number one seed in the West, obviously the Colorado Avalanche, number one seed in the West, the newly minted Florida Panthers. So welcome. This is going to be fun. I am Chris Micieli, and he is Kyle Sullivan from Locked On Avalanche and Armando Velez from Locked On Florida Panthers. A lot to get to because I think if you were to kind of poll a lot of people, and I think that the Stanley Cup matchup that everyone is going to write down, like if this is like the NCAA bracket, I think, just those people that go chalk, to use the term, would put Florida and Colorado in the Stanley Cup final. And I think a lot of people were doing that at the start of the season, and it's kind of worked out to where these are the top two teams in the league. They've secured the number one seeds. So Armando, I'll throw it over to you first. What do you think? Is this going to end up the way? Are we going to have a repeat of that oh so great Stanley Cup matchup between these two of yesteryear?
I didn't live through it, unfortunately. Only 3 years old during the 96 final.
You lived through it. That counts.
Yeah.
That
counts. At least memory wise, but yeah, it'll be a cool storyline based on both teams. Just the Panthers coming around in 93, the Colorado Avalanche relocating from Quebec, and two very young teams going at it at the time. Just could only imagine emotionally living through it. And of course, I've seen throwback videos of the Miami arena being packed, and just how when there is a winner in South Florida, the fans will come. And there is a moment in time where even though the Marlins won the World Series the year after, Dan Marino's era was coming almost to an end. Pat Riley arrives with the Heat. There's the Florida Panthers of 1996, just on what it seemed to be, from what a lot of people said, an improbable run. I mean, you think about even advancing to the Stanley Cup Final, beating Pittsburgh in 7 games at the time. Of course, the Bill Lindsay iconic goal in overtime against Boston to get this team to advance to the next round. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just and that's the last time they won a playoff series. I mean, them and the Toronto Maple Leafs are the only two franchises that haven't won a playoff series since the 04-05 lockout. So only two.
I didn't even pay attention to that. Wow. I mean, I'm not, the teams that we follow is, in a completely different conference. So it's not something that I kind of like pay attention to all the time, but that's pretty crazy. I think your chances are pretty good this year, but the East is pretty stacked, man. I guess talk on that. Like what are the teams that you're really like maybe not looking forward to playing? The teams that you are looking forward to playing, I don't need to know about that. Kind of want to know about, if you guys make it to the Cup Final, like you might be bruised and battered, because it is going to be a gauntlet to get through the East. That's the best thing about the NHL playoffs is anybody can be beaten any given day. We say that about all sports, but it's especially true for the NHL. So in the East, what are you guys going to have to go through? And obviously they're capable of doing it, but it's not going to be a cakewalk.
It won't be whatsoever. I mean, this Florida Panthers team is 3 wins away from getting to 60 wins, which is just 2 off of what Tampa Bay just did a few years ago. But of course, we all know what happened that year with the Columbus Blue Jackets, Sergei Bobrovsky and company doing that. But with people, we can all say the same thing about the Tampa Bay Lightning versus the Toronto Maple Leafs matchup in round 1. That's more than likely going to happen. They might be beat up before going against the Panthers, but whoever gets out of that series will earn their matchup for the Panthers. And I can say the same thing for the Panthers going through that gauntlet of an Eastern Conference. I mean, it's looking more day to day that they're going to face the Washington Capitals in round 1. The goaltending for Washington doesn't really scare me, but of course, they have the top 6 of Washington is still really good. The bottom 6 is still not where a lot of people like them, but I think it's still a very favorable matchup for the Florida Panthers. And of course, getting through the hurdle of what is the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think even though Toronto has home ice, I think Tampa Bay is still favored to win that series. I think Tampa Bay would come out of that, and I think it's going to be another battle of Florida. And just like last season, when these two faced in the first round, a lot of people think whoever wins that series could advance to the Stanley Cup Final. But there's one team on the other side in the Metropolitan that scares me the most out of all the Metropolitan teams. That's the New York Rangers. And it's just
sneaky team.
They have probably the best goaltender in the world right now. Vasilevsky's number one, and then Shesterkin is behind there. Sorokin is there as well. But if you don't give the New York Rangers on the man advantage, I like their chances. But that power play unit of the New York Rangers is just really good. Chris Kreider is having an incredible season. Looks like Alexis Lafreniere is starting to fit into the lineup more. Frank Vatrano has been playing top 6 minutes in a trade that was really to acquire an asset to get more. But that is the one team that on the other side that really scares me the most. That the Florida Panthers, for me, I'd feel a little uneasy going against them if they were to make it to the conference final.
Yeah. Andrew Kopp was a good pickup too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's playing well. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, when it comes to the Florida Panthers as a whole, like if you look at the trajectory both the Avalanche and the Panthers have made over the past couple of years, it's kind of similar. You have your stacked top line and depth pieces added and a lot of homegrown talent. And both teams are really riding goalies that other teams have given up on. And you mentioned Bob in his run with Columbus. There's been some times where the narrative with the goalie position in Florida is still unsettled, where it's been the Darcy Kemper show in Colorado, and they kind of feel confident in that. Do you feel confident in the goalie tandem that you're going to be bringing into the playoffs when it comes to like a potential matchup with the Rangers?
If they can get if it's a close game late and they control possession, sure. I'm very confident that they'll be able to continue to attack until they're able to get through. It's happened plenty of times this season. We've seen it against James Reimer, former Panther. We've seen it against Martin Jones as well. We've also seen it against Igor Shesterkin twice, once in a losing effort. The first two matchups between the Florida Panthers and the New York Rangers, they got 6 goals in the third period combined in both of those games. One of them was too little too late, being down 4-0 in November. The other time was to come back and win, which the Florida Panthers have 28 comeback wins, the most in the NHL. They've done it 5 times where it's been a 4-goal lead, a 3-goal lead of 5 times. So it's been a really it's been this team has gone through so much adversity. We're talking about coaching change. We're talking about Aaron Ekblad coming out again for a leg injury, the opposite leg of what it was last year too. And Bobrovsky, his numbers are, at least his regular season numbers, are looking very close to what they were in Columbus in his final season there. So it's like looking into that upward trajectory to where Bob is versus his first 2 seasons. I mean, and Colorado, I mean, look at what they're doing. They don't pay a Vezina Trophy finalist in Philip Grubauer, and look at the seasons he's having in Seattle. Bring in Darcy Kemper. You trade for a 1st-round pick to get a Darcy Kemper. Of course, injury has been the injury bug has been not in his favor this year, but still the fact that they can still play defensively sound hockey in front of him too. I mean, Cale Makar is not going to win the North, but there's still a chance that he could. He's still up there.
Blaspheme.
But still, the defensive core there is still plays well in front of the goalie, and they were right by letting Grubauer walk, and of course that helped them pave the way to pay their captain Gabriel Landeskog. Which I want to ask you, what's the status of Gabriel Landeskog's injury and how's he looking?
Well, when he went in for surgery, we were told they'd like to have him back by the playoffs. And we kind of took that as, all right, maybe like the last week of the season to get a couple games under his belt before the playoffs start. He'll be back. It's the last week of the season and he's not back yet. And hasn't been really much word on it. I haven't heard anything. I don't know if Kyle has, but I think if he gets any games in the regular season, I think that's a plus. But I don't know, just a gut feeling. I don't think it's happening. I think if he's coming back, it's going to be, unfortunately, in the playoffs, and that's when he's going to have to work the rust off. Is that first round? I don't know if you think any differently, Kyle, but that's kind of where I'm at with him.
Yeah, I think the consensus amongst Avalanche fans has been that optimism that you want Gabriel Landeskog to come back in this little home stretch that you get right before we wrap up the season, because you've seen Bowen Byram come back from injury, be a little slow. Samuel Girard come back from injury, be a little bit slow. And you don't want Gabriel Landeskog's first appearance to be in the playoffs, which could be against Dallas. You don't want him catching his legs with playoff hockey, especially with like a knee surgery. That's something you want to, like, where nothing's on the line, garbage time, let him kind of get acclimated to the game again, and then hit the playoffs with as close to 100% as you could get. But with every passing game, Avalanche fans kind of worry a little bit. But yeah, you're not really hearing much out of the Avalanche on when he's coming back, but he's coming back. We know that for sure.
Yeah, I think for the Avs, they're down Mikko Rantanen, they're down Landeskog, they're down Devon Taves. And Kyle and I were talking for yesterday's episode, like, if all they are missing come playoff time is Gabe Landeskog, I think Avs fans will take that. Because I don't know if you noticed, Armando, it's been a rough go of it the past few days for the Avalanche, and you can pinpoint the reasons why, and you can kind of say, like, those guys that are out would correct those problems that we are currently having. So yeah, we want them back, and I think that's the way it's going to go. I think the Avs will be relatively, I'll say 99% healthy, with that 1% being the Gabe Landeskog that's not around. But I think everybody else is on track to be back by the playoffs, which they absolutely need. But I want to talk about that, sir, and this President's Trophy, which is up for grabs still. I know you guys have the inside track on it right now. But you made a comment before we hit record, and I want to press you on that. But I want to talk about HelloFresh, and then we'll get to that. So HelloFresh, and with HelloFresh, you get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip the trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. You get farm fresh seasonal produce and easy to make recipes delivered right to your door every week. Ingredients travel from the farm to your doorstep in under a week. So they always arrive fresh, all without the trip to the grocery store or the farmer's market. So go to HelloFresh.com/LockedOn16 and use the promo code LockedOn16 for up to 16 free meals and 3 free gifts. Once again, it's HelloFresh.com/LockedOn16, and the promo code is LockedOn16 for up to 16 free meals and 3 free gifts. I can't keep saying 16. It's just like 16. It's like, if I say it too many times, I think what was the mirror thing that we did when we were kids?
You'll be bringing like the 16 version of Beetlejuice.
It's like a Ouija board I'm saying over here. So yeah, but HelloFresh.com, awesome service. Go check it out. All right, President's Trophy, and I don't know, like, I would love to have it. I know it's one of those things that there's a side of a fan base that's like, don't want it, too much pressure, and then the other side is like, definitely want it because I want that home ice. The Avs they had it in their grasp, and I want to ask you this: have the Panthers had a 4-game losing streak all season? If you can remember off the top of your head, have they lost?
I know they've had a 3. On the top of my head, they had a 3-game home losing streak in the middle of February. From what I remember,
okay.
They have had a on the top of my head, they have had a 4-game losing streak in November. It was Sergei Bobrovsky getting hurt. And it was a trip to Pittsburgh, Tampa Bay, New Jersey, and
Okay.
the New York Rangers in that same trip.
Well, that's not going to make Avs fan feeling better because it was in November.
So
if you did that in maybe January, February, I think that might make Avalanche fans see they can do it too. I mean, they did it, but it was early in the year. Where it's happening for the Avs right now has a section of Avalanche fans kind of in hysterics. Some are, it's not a big deal because they are down those guys that I mentioned before. And Jared Bednar is kind of piecing together different lines and combinations and seeing how things work. And he's been doing that for a little while. They've won games while he's doing that, and they just haven't played well in these past 4 games. You guys had a nice run of 13 games in a row, won, just lost to Tampa. And so, I mean, but you're still up in the overall points. And where do you sit in all of that with the President's Trophy? Which side of the fence are you on? Do you want it and be guaranteed that home ice for the duration, or are you standoffish and like, not necessarily that you don't want it, but it's okay if we don't get it?
I'm on the latter of that. Magic number is 3 for the Panthers to clinch the President's Trophy. For me, I think it should be about worrying about one round at a time for these Panthers, because there's no guarantee that even if you don't get it, that Colorado makes it to the Stanley Cup Final, even though they should. Just like the loss against Tampa Bay, after losing that game, some of the same issues that went from last year's playoffs, like giving up a lot of power play goals, 3 to be exact, gave up a shorthanded goal as well, and I was annoyed a little bit, but then I thought about this. My mindset was this: forget about Tampa Bay, and here's what I mean by that. You have a first round series to take care of first before you can even think about meeting up with them in the second round. Same thing with the Colorado Avalanche. Forget the Avalanche for now. Worry about them if you get to the Stanley Cup Final. And for the Panthers, their next 3 matchups, the way Boston's looking right now in the standings, they are 3 points ahead of the second wild card spot, but also 3 points behind the third spot in the Atlantic. So I don't know what kind of lineup Boston is going to put out there. They beat the Rangers the other day. They got shut out by Pittsburgh, which put a really big dent into the last spot in the Metro for Pittsburgh and Washington. So Pittsburgh has multiple different matchups that they could possibly have in round 1. But there's so many other important matchups on Tuesday night that says more about the playoff picture than Florida Boston on Tuesday. I mean, we have Vegas Golden Knights versus Dallas Stars. That's a very, very important one. Pittsburgh versus Edmonton, as well as the race for the Art Ross for Connor McDavid and Jonathan Huberdeau as well. So there's a lot of more important ones on that one, but we also don't know what Boston is going to put out there. Of course, the play that gave up the shorthanded goal, Barkov got beat, but I don't know if it was like for effort or not, but Barkov did not skate to his fastest when the Tampa Bay Lightning cleared the puck and Brandon Hagel got the puck and beat him to it, which resulted in a shorthanded goal by foot. But the Panthers, think about this. They can go 1-2-0 in the next 3 games. And if the Colorado Avalanche go 2-0-1, the Florida Panthers still win the President's Trophy. And their next 3 games are Boston, which they've won 2 out of the 3. The first one was the first one was an overtime loss in Boston, a shutout loss, excuse me. Montreal, they haven't lost all year. They've dominated that series. And with the exception of 1 game versus Ottawa, which was the start of a COVID spread in December, they lost 8-2 in that one. But the other times, one of them was via a comeback against Ottawa. So even if they put half a lineup out or even rest some guys, I don't think they should have a hard time taking care of the Montreal Canadiens and possibly the Ottawa Senators, or maybe even at least getting a point in those matchups.
I'll see your Montreal Canadiens and raise you a Seattle Kraken, which somehow the Colorado Avalanche lost to in this 4-game skid.
Panthers got swept by the Kraken this year.
Who did?
The Kraken swept the Panthers this year too.
What's going on?
We got the Coyotes did that to us.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't sweep. I mean, we struggled. We struggled against the Coyotes this year. Definitely struggled. But I know I'll let you go, Kyle. But I think, just knowing that at least you have your conference home games, and then whatever. If you don't get that President's Trophy, and you make it to the Cup Final, man, you just take your chances. And you just got to win one game, and then you shift it. So yeah,
I will say I want a Game 7 on home ice, but
right, exactly.
But if Andrew Burnett has always described it as a bonus getting the President's Trophy,
right.
And that's where I'm at. I don't really believe in the whole superstition of if you win the President's Trophy, you don't win the Cup. I know there's that thing for the 2015 the 2013 Blackhawks in that shortened season, but there's also when you were talking about the skid that the Colorado Avalanche are on right now. The Chicago Blackhawks, in one of their years that they won the Stanley Cup, I think it was 2015, they lost like 3 straight games in a row at the end of the regular season. They ended up winning the Cup.
It's true. So, Tampa's done the same thing recently as well. So, yeah, you just don't like going into the postseason kind of, losing more games than you're winning. But, yeah, go ahead, Kyle.
And with the reason, like, the President's Trophy should mean something a little bit more to maybe like your Tampas, your Chicagos, when they were going after it. Like, for where both of our organizations have come from, like literally we had the peaks in the 90s, and then honestly the basement for both of us, both Colorado and Florida. And it's just one more thing to add to this story. Like, we're on a collision course for the Stanley Cup. Let's just be honest here. Like, on paper, these two teams, especially like in our matchups we've already played against each other head to head, like these two teams, it's a stalemate. Like, the way they're constructed, everything about these two teams, they mirror each other. Mm-hmm. And the President's Trophy for either Florida or Colorado is just one extra thing. Like,
yes,
we were beginning wire to wire. We were the best team in the league. We won the President's Trophy. We have that home ice. And when you go to the Cup and you redeem the organization for all of the like really bad years we've gone through, it's just one more thing. Like, we were the best team all year, and we have the Cup to prove it. It's just one more added thing to the narrative that both of these teams are writing right now.
Yeah, absolutely, and it makes for a good story as well when you get to look back at it. And going back to Andrew Burnett in a press conference, he said that the President's Trophy is something that you look at years in advance. You don't that he's just not worried about it in the then and now. That you could just look up and say, "Wow, what a great team."
Right.
And even though the goal is to win the Stanley Cup, even if you don't, and you're looking like 15, 20 years from now, you're looking at it's like at one point they were really this team was really going for it, and that they had it, that they were in contention. And it tells people, even generations who weren't born into watching a said team going to being a contender, that says that's also a time to like story tell too. Like, it's like, like even if the Tampa Bay Lightning didn't win those back-to-back Stanley Cups, it makes for a story, not a good story for their 2019. People can talk about, hey, this President's Trophy win. It tells for a story, good or bad.
Yeah.
I want to talk about award season and stuff like that. And you mentioned the Cale Makar and Roman Josi thing. By the way, you're dead wrong on that. No, I don't know. It's going to be close. But where our allegiance lies. But what is the, for the Hart, you're always going to have Connor McDavid in there, and now he's set a personal record for points in a season. Is Huberdeau in there? Is the McDavid and Huberdeau kind of like what the Josi and Makar award is for best defenseman? Like, you feel, I'm sure I know where your allegiance lies. Should he get it? Or is McDavid his only the other horse in that race? Or is I think the Shesterkin kind of Hart has gone away a little bit. Mm-hmm. How is that gonna play out? Is that kind of similar to what we're going through with Makar and Josi? I'm kind of getting at.
Here's how I see it when it comes to the Hart. I think voter fatigue is going to kick in with Connor McDavid.
Good.
So let's say Connor McDavid wins the Art Ross and Jonathan Huberdeau falls just short. There's another guy there by the name of Austin Matthews.
Austin Matthews.
Yeah, I know.
And the fact is, here's the facts. Goals are sexier than assists.
Sure.
That's just the truth. And I hate it for Jonathan Huberdeau that he's having just this much of a breakout season, the most points in Florida Panthers history, the most assists by a left winger in NHL history. And he's 3 away from breaking the assist record for wingers in general. He's 3 away from passing Jaromir Jagr, what he did in 1996. And that 96 team beat Jaromir Jagr in the conference final too. So that's the kind of history that Jonathan Huberdeau is making. But of course, goals are sexier. What Austin Matthews is doing, the voters are gonna, of course, favor Matthews, and of course, a number 1 overall pick playing in the largest market in the NHL too. Austin Matthews has that advantage. But if Jonathan Huberdeau wins the Art Ross, it's going to increase his chances a lot more, and that's why I've been campaigning so much for Huberdeau. I'm campaigning for it, but every national podcast I've listened to, not just Locked On, of our fellow colleagues, but outside of it, everyone's talking more Matthews than Huberdeau.
I mean, Matthews has gotten the EA NHL cover 2 out of 3 years. I mean, so we're done with him. Like that's his award, right? He doesn't need to get the heart on top of all of that. Come on now. And how you're saying, like, you feel bad for Huberdeau because there's always something else that happens that kind of prevents him from, achieving like awards like that. For Avalanche fans, it's head coach of the year. There's always something that happens that prevents Jared Bednar from getting kind of like that recognition. That's outside of, well, you have like this elite team with all of this talent on there. He shouldn't get it. And I kind of fight against that and say, like, well, no, you still have to coach that talent. It's not, there's a lot of ego going around on that team, and you need to like kind of keep it all tight and play the system. He does a very good job at that. The year he should have won it, he didn't, because like he had one of the best turnarounds in sports history, where the Avalanche were a dumpster fire, and then the very next year they make the playoffs. He didn't win it because the Vegas Golden Knights came into existence and make the Stanley Cup Final. So, exactly. Now this year, you had the whole situation that you had down there with Joel Quenneville and the whole Chicago Blackhawks thing, and Andrew Burnett takes over, and it's like they don't miss a beat. So I kind of feel like that's where head coach of the year is going because of that whole story. And I don't want to take away from that, because you guys could have went downhill fast, because even though, your team had nothing to do with what happened where Quenneville was in Chicago, that's a big, undertaking to take this team and say, hey, just let's keep with the system. And he's done that. Do you feel like he's got that under lock and key as far as coach of the year goes?
I wouldn't say so. I think he's up there in the top 5, that's for sure. But there's a guy up in Alberta by the name of Daryl Sutter, and what he's doing up there with that team. Of course, the Calgary Flames don't make the playoffs last year in the Canadian division, and then they're now division champions out there in the Pacific. So Daryl Sutter is definitely an honorable mention. Of course, Gerard Gallant again for the Rangers. That's former Panthers head coach. I mean, he got fired for philosophical differences. Of course, there's that famous picture of him exiting in a taxi cab outside of Raleigh. So that's definitely one that is challenging Andrew Burnett for the Jack Adams Award.
Good, babe. All right, why don't we get to Rock Auto and then kind of focus on the playoffs? Some questions I want to ask you on the playoffs, so go for it.
Yeah, Rock Auto. And with the ever increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible to access all the I don't have the ad read in front of me. With the ever increasing numbers of makes and models, it is now impossible for you to order the parts on their computer, choosing only the warehouse their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Now that tab just opened.
There you go.
Why spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto's prices are reliably low for every customer. Go to rockauto.com and see all the parts for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in there. How did you hear about Spox? So they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. And with that ad read, guys, it was like in the middle of like loading on my screen. It's like, please say this first part right before it loads. And it just goes to show that we're human here, and even though we're podcasters. So
Florida internet down there, right?
Maybe. There's also a different aquifer up here when it comes to our water, and people say jokes about Disney when it comes to like our water that's like not safe for work to say on this podcast. But quickly, before we discuss playoffs and all that, have you noticed like kind of the trends with the Panthers and the Avalanche when it comes to like drafting and like kind of like their dog years?
Well, I know they did, like they took Mikko right before the Panthers pick, and I think McKinnon was McKinnon was number one, and didn't Panthers pick number two that year?
Yep, Barkov.
It was Barkov, and is that the only two, or is there one more? Why am I
one more? 2011, Landeskog was second.
It was Landeskog. That's what I thought it was.
Jonathan Huberdeau was third.
Yeah,
in that same draft.
A friend of mine who's a Panthers fan just reminds me of that, especially the McKinnon one, because he wasn't going to go there. Like they were not going to take him, and they were set on Seth Jones. And if it was not for Patrick Waugh, who kind of stepped in and was like, I think we should go with this McKinnon kid. Who knows? I don't know how much interest the Panthers had in McKinnon and who would have been number two if it still would have been Barkov. I have no idea. Maybe you do if you knew back then, if you heard things, but McKinnon was not the guy until kind of the last couple days. Pretty crazy story. Yeah. So it's just, I love stuff like that. I absolutely love it, because I love playing like the what if game, you know what I mean? And you do it all the time with drafts and guys that were taken right before. And people do it all the time now with like Seth Curry, because he went whatever. I think I know, like, I think with the Knicks, and the Knicks have just been awful for, 50 years now. I can't remember if they picked right before Golden State or right after. I don't remember. If you want to look that up, go for it.
I think it might have been right after.
I can't remember. I think they had an opportunity to take him and they didn't, but whatever. It's just, that's one of those things, like that is a franchise changing moment. And I mean, the Panthers have worked out okay. It's not like they missed out on Nathan McKinnon and they haven't been able to recover from it. But yeah, you think about that. And I just the other day, someone redrafted the Cale Makar draft, and they superimposed the jerseys on him, and they had him in a Flyers uniform. And I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna go throw up. I don't want to see that at all. But I love it. I love playing the what if game.
Do you remember the story that came out of Philadelphia about Ron Hextall and Cale Makar? Do you remember hearing about?
Oh yeah. I remember it wasn't that long ago that it came out. Maybe like a month or two ago.
Yeah.
But what was the details of it? I don't remember the specifics.
Apparently, Ron Hextall wanted Cale Makar, and then they ended up going with Nolan Patrick.
Yes.
So
yes.
That was the start of some tension over there in Philadelphia.
Yeah. And you wonder how much of that is true. I mean, you can always do the hindsight, and like, did he really push for Cale Makar, or did he say like, he wasn't as forceful? Like now, when you talk about it, you're just going to be like, I want to Cale Makar. Oh, like he was number one on my list.
Of course.
But back then, when the conversations were being had, was a little bit more like toned down and like, we maybe look into this Cale Makar guy a little bit more than we are. You never know. You always kind of puff your chest out when you feel like you had the right answer all along, but who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, I remember that draft, and like Nolan Patrick was kind of like the easy, sexy bet for that pick. Cale Makar, you had to do a little bit more research, and like, yeah, he had an incredible college career, but it's hindsight when it comes to that and what you're wanting. And especially now that Hextall's not in Philly, it's a lot easier to say that.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the success that the Colorado Avalanche have It's mostly without Bowen Byram. Of course, the Matt Duchene trade to Ottawa works in the favor of Colorado at the time. I feel for Bowen Byram because he's had a whole bunch of head injuries, and I remember hearing him contemplating on whether he wanted to play hockey again. But still, if Bo Byram is able to be consistently healthy there, this is just continuing to just adding. It's a bonus to this roster for someone like Bo Byram.
Yeah, and it's something that we've talked about many times with how this team's constructed, with like being able to have a healthy Bo Byram. That we're making a case for who's the healthy scratch night in, night out. Like that's like an evidence to the depth. And like, yes, Bowen Byram's healthy and active, and like going into this playoffs, you're still, especially when you have head injuries and like the concussion issues like he has, you still kind of grimace whenever he does take a hit. And like we said this numerous times this episode, but playoff hockey is a different animal. And you kind of worry about Bo Byram in the playoffs, but with the depth that we have, it's going to be that next man up mentality, but you want to keep Bo all the way through because his potential and the talent that he brings to this team.
What I want to know is, we're playoffs right around the corner. Guys get up for this. You guys, that kind of skating through the season, have a decent season, kind of just like get reinvigorated when the playoffs come around. Who's the guy for the Panthers that you're kind of looking at that could really kind of take off in the playoffs and kind of become maybe more of a household name? Because there's always those guys. There's always those guys that make those plays that you're not expecting them to. You're always expecting like your top line to do, to play great, and they do. But there's always those depth guys and guys that kind of just like sneak in there and play great because it's the playoffs. Who's that for the Panthers?
I'm going to say two people. One of them is a name that many people know. It's his first ever time in the playoffs. He just scored his 30th goal. That one's Sam Reinhart. Most of his goals have been on the power play. Draft night, past midnight. I think it was Pierre LeBrun who was the first who reported that they traded a 2022 1 and their 7th round pick prospect that they got the year before, Devin Levi, who was a candidate for the Hobie Baker Award this past season. Went to Canada for the Olympics, didn't play, but his value like skyrocketed based on what he did in World Juniors, winning the silver medal, losing to Spencer Knight in that very same World Juniors. So 2 Panthers prospects at the time, and then using that as ammunition to go get a Sam Reinhart, who now has 30 goals. And this next one is a guy who, it was the former GM of the Florida Panthers who made this trade to get him from Toronto. And he is a guy who's going to get paid this offseason, and it's not going to be by the Florida Panthers because their salary cap implications. And that's Mason Marchment. That one he's on the third line playing that left wing. The last few games he's been on the top 6 based on maintenance days for like Carter Verhaeghe and all. But Mason Marchment, he's just all effort all the time. He's always going near the boards. He's always like making that big hit in the neutral zone to create a turnover going the other way. And Mason Marchment, it was a trade for Dennis Malgin, and Dennis Malgin only played 8 total games for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and now he's no longer in the NHL. So that it was a great trade by Dale Talon at the time at the 2020 trade deadline. But who would have thought that this guy was going to explode the way he would on the Panthers? He won an AHL championship, the Calder championship with the Toronto Marlies. He's an alum of the Orlando Solar Bears, the local hockey team that I have here in Orlando. So it's funny because I probably seen Mason Marchment play before, but I just didn't really know who he was at that time. So it's crazy to think that I wish I had recollection of like the exact games that I went to see like how he did in the game that I went to.
What's Thornton up to?
He doesn't play every single night, but I think he'll be playoff ready. And I think that's the purpose of this. The fourth line gets juggled so often. Sometimes you'll have a Ryan Lomberg in there. Sometimes you'll have a Nola Chari out there. But I think if desperate times come for desperate measures and you need that veteran presence in there, I think there's going to come a point where he's going to start the latter part of a series and then just not lose his spot in the lineup after that. So I think he's going to probably start a first round series like not being scratched, but likely playing towards the latter part, especially if they're down. That's my thoughts on Joe Thornton.
Okay. I mean, if they do meet in the final, or if the Avs get eliminated early before the final, I mean, everybody's going to be rooting for that to happen. Come on, let's get real here.
Yeah. I think this is my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
If the Panthers win Stanley Cup, after Barkov is the first one to lift the Stanley Cup, I think the next one should be Joe Thornton.
Yeah.
Oh, it is going to be a Ray Bork moment easily. Easily. And then I don't want to know like about the good side. We know your team is a good team, so I don't need to hear about that. We've heard about that all year long. What's the weakness? So when we eventually meet up in the Stanley Cup Final, and it's game one, what can the Avalanche exploit? Those little cracks in the armor of the Florida Panthers. What is it, or what are they?
I mean, the obvious is the goaltending as well for the Panthers. It's funny because Sergei Bobrovsky is tied for the top in wins, but we all know. But I always tell people that wins are a team stat, not a individual stat. But just if they're able to play the solid defense around them, even before the game against the Tampa Bay Lightning, they were in a 6 or 7 game span. They were not allowing that many goals, and they weren't allowing that many shots on the goalie as well. So a lot of people don't give enough credit to the defense in front of Bobrovsky and Spencer Knight as well. It's been so much better, and they're blocking shots more often. Sunday's game was a little bit of a dud, but but they're moving on past it. They don't seem to be bothered by that loss on Sunday. I'm not. I was just annoyed for a few minutes, and then okay, it's time to move on.
Right. I'm looking up there. Who they got? What's the remaining schedule? Who they got left?
At Boston, and then a back-to-back at Montreal and Ottawa.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, it's yours. You guys got it.
What a tough stretch.
I think you guys have that wrapped up. So, what else? You got anything else, Kyle? Or
no, I'm honestly, after the multiple matchups that we've had this year and just the trajectory of the two teams, I'm looking forward to this like eventual like meetup if it does happen. Like, and it's both teams. Honestly, there's not really, even with the history, like meeting back in that Cup of '96, there's no real bad blood, and it's especially after that last. I remember the last game we had. Me and Chris, before we recorded, were like, I wish we could see a 7-game series against this Florida Panthers team.
That game, the first game, throw it out the window. It was so early in the season. That was the Avs' first road trip of the season. Florida cleaned their clock, in that game.
Nate McKinnon didn't have a shot on goal in that game.
I think that was like his first game with a shot on goal in 100 and something games.
And I remember, I will say that there was a goalie interference called Mikko Rantanen that shouldn't have been called a goalie interference. That he was not so happy about, and he had every right to be
I'll
upset
have to go
about
back
that.
and watch that. I moved. There's a few games from this season that I've just exited from my memory.
Mm-hmm.
And that first one against the Florida Panthers is one of them. But the second game between those two was
epic.
Wow.
It was in December, I believe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It wasn't much later. There's been a handful of games that the Avalanche have played that will probably be thought of as like the game of the year. For me, it's that one. It was in December, but my God, was that like a playoff game? It was phenomenal. And you say that when an East Coast team plays a West Coast team, you're like, oh, I'd love to see 7 games of this. 100% true between Florida and Colorado, because if we get 7 games of that would be the most exhilarating Stanley Cup final in a very, very long time. So I'm looking forward to it.
And I signaled for the people on the podcast feed, I did this with my hand on my chest. That was me signaling that my heart will probably rip out of my chest and my heartbeat will be like at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I mean, I'm not wearing my Apple Watch right now. I could just look at the heart rate.
It would
minute.
call 911 for you, basically.
Yeah, so that'll probably be me. I mean, I went through 3 overtime games in 2016 against the New York Islanders, double overtime games. They lost all 3 of them, and my heart was just racing. And a little story about 2016, when I was still living in the region, I purchased tickets for Game 7 before Game 6 started against the New York Islanders. They were playing at the Barclays Center. If they won, the Florida Panthers would be hosting a Game 7. Trocheck was tripped. It wasn't called. John Tavares scores the tying goal, and then the game winner, and no Game 7.
Oof. Do you have tickets already secured for round 1 or not yet?
Once I know a date, this is just something about me is like, if I don't know an exact date of a game yet, regardless of game number, I can't buy tickets to anything. I need to know an exact date because I'm a planner like that. So
okay. All right.
Once I know the exact date,
You're
I'll
in.
make plans.
All right, man. Well, playoffs right around the corner. Both our teams are set up nice to make a good run. So if they do make it, I think we'll have a couple more crossovers in our future when and if that happens. So I think it's a good rivalry. I mean, there is some history. It's a rivalry where there's no hatred or anything like that. It's just, they have a brief history together. And I think even though that happened 26 years ago, I think there's some, even nobody that's, playing now maybe even remembers when that happened. But there's some, revenge maybe wanted there from a franchise point of view for the Florida Panthers. So
I have a feeling there will be rats.
Yeah.
That's the year. That was the year.
Man, good luck in the playoffs. And again, if we both make it as far as we want to go, we'll do this again a few times during that Stanley Cup final.
Absolutely. So. And for my listeners, tell them where they can find you guys online.
I usually tweet from the show's Twitter page, LOPN_Avalanche. Kyle and his wonderful Twitter handle is.
You can find me at Shaggy Von Doom.
There you go.
Everywhere you look.
And for the people on the Colorado Avalanche feed, they can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. And one more thing for people on the Panthers feed is Chris Micieli is the Thursday host of Locked On NHL. So if you want to go hear more of what Chris's takes on the league as a whole, not only check Chris out on Thursdays, but check out Locked On NHL every single day.
Now, I do host that Locked On NHL Thursdays with Adam Denker of Locked On Lightning. Is that going to turn off any Florida Panther fans that want to tune into that? I hope not. It's a fun show. We do the power rankings every Thursday, so tune in. It's good. So, all right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in for this special crossover, number 1 seed crossover show. And like I said, maybe we'll meet up again in the near future. So thank you, Armando, for doing this and crossing over. He is Armando Velez of Locked On Panthers, Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan, and myself, Chris Micieli of Locked On Avalanche. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.